morning, everybody. What is up? It is week 2, season 2, episode 2 of Coast to Coast college football pregame show. Preseason show number 2. It's going to be the ACC's day today. But before we get into that, I'm your host. Again, changing backgrounds already. The undefeated, undisputed, reigning national champion host, Bill Shawcross. To my upper left is the man that's going to change his background every other week to hope it brings him good luck. But he is my Buckeye brother from another mother and the guy that is hoping to carry the Big Ten mantle this year. Mr. Cottrell Simpson, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. One thing I will say about the intro, Bill, you could say undisputed all you want to. I'm disputing it myself. I got my asterisk ready. I'm ready to slap it up on that new fresh sign they put on the big house about being the 2023-2024 national champion. So you may call it undisputed, but damn it, I'm disputing it until the NCAA tells me that I don't have a gripe.
They already have. You're just not listening, but that's okay. That's all right. I know you to deal with it and cope with it in different ways. I understand that as a Buckeye fan, but you're just going to have to get used to it. The easiest way to make it go away is to win this year. So, you gotta go take care of business. You guys are one of the favorites. But also another Big Ten favorite, another co-host, rocking his Bruce Wayne / Squidward motif this week. Mr. West Coast himself, Mr. iBlack Alex Elmore. How are you, sir?
Hey, man, it's an early morning on the West Coast, 7:03 sharp. I got to get up to hang out with my boys and talk some college football. Diving into the ACC today, I'm extremely excited. It's another wide-open conference, kind of like the Big 12, with a lot of random contenders that we haven't seen previously. And with that extended college football playoff, we should see a couple of them get in. I'm excited to talk about it today and dive in a little bit deeper. And I can't wait for Cottrell to take his time at some point in the show to throw out his asterisks and talk shit on Michigan. So that'll be fun.
You can talk shit about Michigan every week.
It's ACC week, I'll leave him alone unless
provoked. That'll stop you.
Unless provoked.
Unless provoked.
Hey, we got to talk about coaches today too. So
it's a little bit every week. It just continues to eat at Cottrell. It's just like the little fish nibbling under the water, and he can't get rid of it. And the more things that keep coming out, and it's not helping his case, and it's just eventually he's just going to have to face reality that this is the way it is. And like I said, but he's got a chance to wipe it off the board right away. So
I won't stop until we get wins vacated.
That ain't going to happen. So
I will have my torch. I will have my riot stick, and just let me know where I need to go, NCAA.
A torch going to run out of gas. But listen, today's show, guys have already touched on a little bit. Big ACC day today. ACC / Notre Dame, because they're kind of in the ACC, kind of not because they think they're special, but they kind of stink every year. So they don't want to join a conference like the real big boys. Like, hello, you should have joined the Big Ten 10 years ago, but you guys want your own TV deal and your own channel on NBC, and you guys just continue to be irrelevant. But that's neither here nor there. So we're going to do ACC today. Before we do that, we are going to do top 5 head coaches. I don't know the names. I just heard there's already discrepancies. So this is going to probably be the first feisty segment of the year, if I had to guess. And then obviously we're going to do ACC preview, who we think wins, dark horses. Alex has already alluded to it. ACC is kind of, I think you have your 2 or 3 teams up top, but I think ACC is a little bit different I think the mid-tier teams in the ACC have a bona fide argument you can make that could be there at the end. I think there's a couple teams in the mid that are going to be really solid football teams this year. So we'll get into that. Obviously, our Heisman watch for the guys that we think are going to be the top contenders to hit the board for the Heisman from the ACC. And as always, we'll finish with the Eliminator and who we think has a shot to start the year there and maybe make it to the end. So without further ado. I don't know what order we're going to do these in. I don't know if I can pick or Cottrell's just going to slap them up. I don't know what we're doing.
I'll start it off here. I'll lead us off.
There we go.
All right.
So one of those surprises me.
So my top 5 head coaches, just to kind of give you guys a little bit of insight of really what went into my mind here. I'm thinking about guys that I would start my program with basically today, who I feel like would give me the best chance not only to recruit but to win.
Then your list sucks.
Here
I'm sorry.
we go.
I'm gonna hold this back. I'm gonna let you do your explanations. I can't interrupt you. I want you to give me the same because my list is fucking crazy. So I'm gonna I'm gonna let you go. My bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So
All right. That
so
being said,
I want winners. I want guys that can recruit. What are you gonna say, Bill?
I need to go after you then. Then for this to work, then I need to go after you, and then we will let Alex go last and let Alex do it.
I don't remember where we're at right now with the order. Kind of put it in random, so I don't know where we're gonna be. But for me, want guys that are gonna win, and I want guys that are gonna recruit. So number 5, I'm starting off with Lincoln Riley. And look, I understand Lincoln Riley's a guy who hasn't necessarily like won on the big stage, but I will say one of the things that separates him from being on that like elite tier, he hasn't found that guy to take with him as a defensive coordinator. At Oklahoma, defenses can never get on track. The offenses were phenomenal. USC, again, defenses really couldn't get on track. Offense was phenomenal. Lincoln Riley's a guy that knows how to recruit. But if you look at these other, big name head coaches, they always have that defensive coordinator that ultimately ends up becoming a head coach or is just widely known as one of the best defensive coordinators in the game. You look at Kirby Smart, you see Dan Lanning, he got a job at Oregon. They won 2 national championships together. You look at Ryan Day, he now has Jim Knowles, who, many people thought was one of the best defensive coordinators in football. And then even in a guy in Dabo Swinney, he had Brent Venables for a really long time. They were successful together. And, obviously Venables is off at Oklahoma now being the head coach there. I think if Lincoln Riley can find that guy that can take his defenses to that next level with the way that he's able to recruit, I think USC will be a title contender in the future. It's just a case of, can he find that guy? Number 4 for me, I got Steve Sarkisian out of Texas. Turning around Texas program is a big feat. Many people have tried it. We always talk about, is Texas back? Well, last year they were actually back. I think Steve Sarkisian brings forth a great mindset to that Texas team. And I think he's doing a good job of embodying like that Texas football culture, bringing in guys like Quinn Ewers, homegrown kind of guy. I think this year, especially with bringing in Isaiah Bond out the portal, I think Steve Sarkisian showed you last year what he can do with top level talent. And they produced a lot of talent in the NFL this past year as well. So I like Steve Sarkisian. I like the trajectory that he is on. Number 3 for me, I got Kyle Whittingham. Kyle Whittingham may be the best on this list of making the most out of nothing. Utah's never going to be a hotbed for recruits, no matter, how great of a coach that you are. He can have talent like you've seen, Dalton Kincaid being one of them, being a great tight end going to the NFL. But as a whole, Utah is not going to be this cesspool of 5-star recruits. And I think Kyle Whittingham does a great job of always having his team in position to win football games. Even when it's going up against, the Caleb Williams of the world or even back in the day, like more so Justin Herbert, it's like he's always going to have this Utah team ready to go, no matter if they're outmanned, no matter if there's more talent on the other side. Utah's always going to be a team where they're going to compete and they're going to fight to win games like crazy. And I think last year showed you a great example of that, not having Cam Rising all year, and they were still able to be successful. Number 2 for me is going to be Ryan Day. And the funny thing about it is Ryan Day is clear-cut the only guy on this entire list that is on the hot seat. And the craziest part about it is he has the highest winning percentage out of everybody on this list. Now, with that said, I also feel like Ryan Day is a guy who's had a ton of talent. Ohio State's always going to have a ton of talented teams. He just hasn't won the big one. He's got some big wins under his belt already. He's got some Rose Bowl wins. He's been to the national championship. He just hasn't gotten over that hump. So that's ultimately why he lands at number 2 for me. I think he will get there, but just needs to conquer that last step. But then number 1 for me, I got to go with Kirby Smart. Look, I understand that ethics-wise, you may not like what he does. I don't like the way he runs his program in terms of letting pretty much everybody get a free pass with all the crazy driving, reckless, just illegal things. But as a football coach, this guy X's and O's. Now that Nick Saban has retired, I think it's clear cut that Kirby Smart is the best coach in college football. He can recruit his ass off, and Georgia wasn't even known as a team that can to get all the great recruits. But now Georgia's going to consistently have top 5, top 3 classes in all of college football's recruiting. And I think if you give Kirby Smart that kind of talent, it's going to be a bad day for a lot of people. So I'm rolling with Kirby Smart here, consistently having the Bulldogs in contention to win championships, and that rounds out my top 5 of coaches. Again, I don't know who's next here, but go ahead and send it over to whoever that may be.
Oh my God, Almighty, bro!
Ooh, man!
I'm glad I'm going last now.
Do you see how awful this list is, Bill?
Is it though?
I'm glad I'm going last now.
Is this list terrible? Because look, I base my list off.
Honestly, no. Two of them are fine. Like,
yeah, 2 out of 5 are fine. Yeah.
Okay.
The even numbers.
Yes. Look, y'all.
And I'm not even against number 1.
You started
as long as
Alex.
he's not number.
I did. If I let you go,
1,
I let you go.
I'll let you go. Go ahead.
I'll let you go. Look, I get that my list is going to have some controversial names on it. I get that I'm throwing some light on some guys who you wouldn't think to show light on. But here are my requirements to be on my list. All right, straight coaching ability, along with the ability to grow your team to be good people, which is why Kirby Smart is not on this list. Kirby Smart's not on my list because 24 different driving offenses since a crash killed one of his players and a staffer, with no sign of things changing. He's not building a strong program. Of course, he's going to have great recruiting classes. Because guess what? You come to Georgia, we have no rules. Do what the fuck you want. And you're going to maybe miss a game, and you're still going to be a star and go to the NFL. So he's not going to be on my list. I'm not wasting any more time talking about him. But again, that's a personal issue. If, like I said, he is a great coach on the field. The second he steps off, though, I got no respect for the man. Other than that, though, like I said, we're stopping to start number 5. Kirk Ferentz. I've always been kind of really high on Iowa as it is. He's been there since 1999. All right. He's only had 3 losing seasons at a school that is not a sexy school to recruit at. It's in the middle of nowhere. Last year, their offense was ranked 130th out of 133 eligible teams, scoring 16.6 points per game. And he took that and took them to a 10-win season. But I don't care that he was on the weaker side of the Big Ten. You give that same sort of offense to 95% of other coaches in college football, they're not going to be able to have it turn it into a 10-win season. And he does it consistently in and out. And he has consistently one of the best defenses every single season. And now that he has a new offensive coordinator, sky's literally the limit. And it's going to be exciting to see what kind of team they turn into this year with an offense that might actually be able to move the ball. And then we got Steve Sarkisian. Just like Cottrell had him on his list, turning that Texas program around is a huge deal. The first Big 12 title in 14 seasons. He started his first 2 seasons were a little rough, 13-12, but that's kind of just the growing pains. He's really gotten it together, and going into the SEC, he's got the program in a great spot for now and the future, with Arch Manning kind of waiting on the back burner for next season when Quinn Ewers should go to the NFL. He's also learned from Pete Carroll, Nick Saban. He's learned from great coaches, so he's really putting that knowledge to the field and actually showing what he learned, and he's really, helping that Texas program be somebody again. And then we got Lane Kiffin. I know that he's not on probably either of y'all's list. I love Lane Kiffin. I love Ole Miss. He's 96-49 as the coach. Last year he was 11-2. This is his 5th coaching stop. He's super young. He started with the Raiders at age 31. All right, so he got into his career extremely early compared to other coaches. But here's what you need to know. In all of Ole Miss's history, they have never had a 10-win season until Lane Kiffin came to town. And in 2 out of the last 3 seasons, they've had 10-win seasons. So that kind of shows Ole Miss is a very historical program, and Lane Kiffin's having the best success the program's ever had with him at the helm. Then we got Kyle Whittingham, which Cottrell also had on his list, and I do not agree. I disagree with. He's spent his entire career in Utah. He's not switching teams, trying to get better. He's definitely had opportunities to leave Utah and go somewhere that has a better name than Utah as far as accolades are concerned. But he's 162-79 there. He's been there since '94. Sorry, like I said, '99. He's been there since '94. He replaced Urban Meyer in 2004 as the head coach. He's only had 2 losing seasons in 19 years, and he won back-to-back Pac-12 championships. And last year, with an injury-riddled season, he had the chance to go back-to-back-to-back. Unfortunately, the injuries were just too much to overcome. And now that he's moved to the Big 12, Texas and Oklahoma are out. Utah's looking to become the new sheriff in town when it comes to the Big 12. And then we got my main man, Dan Lanning. Yes, I'm an Oregon fan. Yes, this may be a homer pick. And yes, I don't give a shit. Because Dan Lanning is one of the best recruiting coaches in college football. Right now, he is number 4 class in 2024, the top class in Pac-12 in 2023 in his first recruiting session. Players want to play for him. Players like Bo Nix transferring to Oregon, Dylan Gabriel transferring to Oregon, Evan Stewart, top tier talent, see what kind of coach he is and see what kind of mentality he has, and they want to go to him. Dan Lanning has the same kind of mentality and charisma as Deion Sanders, but with a defensive mindset like his and his recruiting ability, kind of just like Deion. The Oregon program, though, it was already kind of set up for him, and he's in the perfect spot for him to kind of take that, let's say, level 7 Oregon Duck program and take him to level 10. Now being in the Big Ten with the exposure, it's just the sky's the limit for him, really. And I'm done. Next, I was going to talk a little bit about Dabo Swinney, why he's not on my list. Bill, is Dabo on yours?
He is.
Okay, cool. Then we'll talk about him after you go yours. Anything to say though?
I can't. Yeah. If we're
bring it.
Can,
I went. Right. Now you can say if you want.
All right. So here's the thing for me, and I understand having Dan on your list. That's fine. Like he was in my top 10. But
you're crazy.
Kirk Ferentz being number 5, like. This guy's been coaching damn near my entire life, and I've seen him win 2 Big Ten titles, and neither of them came within the last 20 years. I understand the offensive issues, but like, damn, at some point in 20 years, can you not find the offensive guy? Maybe it's not the offensive coordinator at that point. Maybe it's you. And I get it. Right. I get it. I would hope so. I mean, it's been 25 years since.
Well, he finally fired his son. So, like, that's the move. Do you know how hard it is to be like, look, son, you're fucking fired. You suck.
Well, a good head coach would fire their son if he was the problem.
Well, he's done that. That's why he's now top 5.
To Cottrell's point, over 20 years, if it's the same problem over and over for a guy who's admitted that he has input in the offense, at some point you got to look in the mirror. And I think Kirk Ferentz is a great coach. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a staple for Iowa. He put Iowa on the map. They are consistently 8, 9, 10 win teams every year. Never have an issue with anybody in that football program. Actually turns out way more NFL prospects than I think people realize.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you got to win something. For me, like I'll get into mine when we get to mine. But again, I think he's not a bad choice. I just don't think he's top 5. That would be my gripe with it. I just don't think he's. Again, I think he's a great coach. I just don't think he's top 5.
And then Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin is Brian Kelly Jr. Lane Kiffin couldn't win a big game if it bit him in the ass. Lane Kiffin, I understand that he's a great recruiter, and I will give him credit for that. But Lane Kiffin's had ample opportunity to go out there and win something. I'm not even saying national championship, but like go beat Alabama like one time. Go beat LSU. Like decisively one time while LSU is good. Like Lane Kiffin just big name. I don't think he has anything. I think Lane Kiffin might be one of the most overrated coaches in all of college football.
Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss are one of only 2 teams in the last 4 seasons to score 33 points a game in the SEC. It's Ole Miss and Alabama.
That's a cool stat.
He couldn't beat Alabama. But guess who was that? Who was that? Alabama. Nick Saban, arguably the best coach to ever grace college football, and he couldn't beat him. Okay, now he's gone. Someone's got to step up.
But who has beaten him though? Kirby Smart's beaten him. Dan Lanning hasn't. Dan Lanning he was defensive coordinator at Georgia, but like Dan Lanning has put forth defensive master classes against Nick Saban. Like, and I'm not even saying that you have to go out there. You know who else has beat him? Ed Orgeron. He's beat Nick Saban. Like, you don't have to be.
Yeah, he's not a coach right now, or else he'd be on the list.
That's crazy. You don't have to necessarily. I'm not saying beat Hammond all the time, but I mean, like, damn, beat LSU when they're good. Beat somebody while they're good. That's all I'm asking for.
That's right, though. Mike Leach should be number 1 on this list. Rest in peace, no matter what. Look, man, all I'm saying is Georgia hasn't won since Dan Lanning left. Yes, it's only been 2 years. All right, so I'm not like driving that stat home. I'm just saying, like.
But what has Dan Lanning won?
He beat 0 ranked opponents last year.
Okay, it's not his fault that schedule didn't allow him to play.
Hasn't even
played
won a
two ranked
conference
opponents.
championship.
He played two ranked
Right.
opponents and lost both times.
Well, the same team.
Both times.
Were they not 2 times? 2 separate times?
I'm just saying. Look, I get what you're saying.
And the year before that, he lost to the guy that you have ranked below him.
Correct. Yeah. First year head coach, growing pains are going to happen. This is year 3. It's kind of like the quarterback in any system. Year 3 is where you expect to see that big jump. And I expect to see that big jump in Dan Lanning. His recruiting has never faltered from day one. He's built the best team on the field that you could possibly have. He masters the transfer portal. Today's coaches need to be able to recruit and keep their people happy. Dan Lanning does that. And so he's going to keep his top talent. He's going to keep bringing in more.
It's a lot easier with Phil Knight's checkbook.
But guess what? Phil Knight's never. I get NIL is a newer concept. However, he's not going to say that unless he fully believes in who's leading the way. Yes, and you're right. And they have nice uniforms. You're damn right.
For what it's worth, I will give Dan Lanning credit for this. I love the shots that he took at Kirby because Kirby took some unnecessary shots at Dan, talking about like them recruiting and like spending the money that they have been. And Dan basically said, "Hey, Kirby, let's not act like Georgia's never spent money on players, because I mean, Georgia's probably been doing it for the last 15 years, and it just came really legal the last 4. So let's pump our brakes there." So I'll give Dan credit for that. But you also said he has as much charisma as Dion, and that's nuts.
Ooh, okay. All right. Mm-hmm. Well, okay.
Anybody with the nickname Primetime?
Yeah, that was that's from his playing days. Now as an old
he's still
man,
that guy though. He's he
gets so much shit all over the internet from his recruiting tactics. As far as like,
he might be a bad coach, but I'm just talking about his. You said charisma.
Yeah, charisma. Yes, correct. I did say charisma. Yeah, his charisma's on a 10. All right.
I was a little bit worried, Cottrell, that he was going to sneak onto your list.
How the hell would I have Deion Sanders in my top 5?
Because you're a Colorado lover, my guy.
You are. You got a low key little crush. Like when nobody's around, you crush on Colorado a lot.
He watches that Deion Sanders show on Amazon on repeat.
It's pretty good though.
It is. Definitely is. All right, Bill. Let's get over to your list.
I'm dying here.
Okay.
All right. So obviously, going into my decision making process here, obviously a lot of things that have already been mentioned factored in. But for me as well, accomplishments matter. I don't think you could say a guy is a great coach based upon potential. That's like saying a recruit that's played 1 year is going to be the best quarterback to ever play in college football. I don't abide by that rule. I'm consistent with everything, with every sport. I'm a prove me guy. You got to show me. You got to show me accomplishments. You got to show me you can win the big game. You got to show me you can get over the hump. Recruiting is a big part of it. Player development. I do agree with both guys saying, what kind of goes on within the program matters. But other things overshadow that sometimes. So
it shouldn't. Sorry.
I mean, I get it.
As a program with no national championships, I can understand why you feel that way.
Yeah, but how many Olympic gold medals did we? University of Oregon just win?
This is not an Olympic show. This is a college football show.
We make world athletes too.
What?
Clearly, you don't make good football teams.
Jesus, I guess you're not going to be talking about that after this season, baby.
What week do you guys play?
What is that?
It's October 12th, whatever it is.
Good Lord. I might not even talk that show. I might just sit here and light a cigar and just watch you two argue.
We're going to get you a ref's outfit, and you can just...
I'm not doing that either. But, so, a lot of different things went in. And now, listen, not busted balls. Potential does factor into this, okay? So, that's the reason one of these guys is on the list for me. I would say if you went 6 and 7 for me, my next 2 guys were probably Dan Lanning and Mike Norvell in some combination, some fashion. I'm not going to discredit the guy. I do think he's a good coach. I think he has potential. and I do think the future is bright, but everybody on here is a little bit more accomplished in my opinion. So I'm going to go from the bottom. Kyle Whittingham, I've made no bones about it. I'm a big fan. I do think I think there's a decent chance this is his last year in Utah. I really do. Because I firmly believe I think a couple really big SEC or maybe ACC jobs are going to come open, and I think they're going to make it really hard for him to say no. The guy has done more with probably less than anybody in the country, won over 100 games. He's won wherever he's gone, runs a clean program, runs a very basic, kind of smash mouth, regiment with his players. They are all hard-nosed players. They're all tough. Excuse me. I love everything that Kyle Whittingham does. I think if he gives himself the chance to go to a school where he can get more 4 and 5 star kids and still, impose his learnings and his beliefs on a team like that, I think he has a chance to win a national championship. Not saying he couldn't do it in Utah. It's just way more of a far-fetched situation because, all 4 of these guys in front of them, and then in Oregon, Michigan, Notre Dame, it's an uphill battle for him. But I do have him number 5 because I think just purely coaching, I think he's one of the best in the country. Number 4, Kalen DeBoer. Again, this is if there was a potential pick on my list, it's him. That being said, he was in Washington for 2 years, won a Pac-12 championship, and made to the national championship game last year. Left Washington and went to debatably the best coaching position that there is in the country. Stock full of recruits. He shows up on campus with a possibility of succeeding right away. Has talent everywhere. I believe he's going to succeed there. I think the first year could be a little rough, but I think once he gets settled in, he does have Nick Saban behind him. Nick Saban's there all the time. He's still in the building, still has an office. I think Kalen DeBoer is going to be all right. He's probably going to win a national championship there at some point, if not more than one. I think he's a very good coach, and I think we're going to see that. Did a great job last year in the Pac-12. Like I said, got away the national championship game. Slightly outgunned a little bit in the final, but the guy has a proven track record. Like I said, he has some accomplishments on his list already, and he's going to Alabama. So it's really hard, in my opinion, to keep him off the list. Number 3, the guy that I love to hate, but I've never, I do criticize him for certain things, but I've also been on record numerous times saying that he's a very good football coach. I do believe that. I think he has a little bit of a mental block with Michigan right now. But again, to Cottrell's point, he's got one of the best winning percentages in the history of the game. The guy has won big games both home and away. He's made the college football playoff. Hasn't won that national championship yet. He's easily the best coach to never have won one. If you're writing that list, Ryan Day is number 1 on that list. So firmly on the list for me, number 3. I hate giving Ohio State any credit, but Ryan Day's a good football coach. Number 2 for Dabo. Dabo was interesting for me. So I think if you factor in how he runs a program, he runs a very clean program. All his kids are very close. It's almost a very faith-based kind of, belief within their program. I hate how he's turned the back on the portal because I think he's hurt the program a little bit. I think everybody's just come to grips now that you just have to use the transfer portal. It's just there's too many good players that go in it every year that can help your program. That being said, he rests on his morals and he believes in his principles and his coaching principles, and he has belief in his kids. He puts it on him that if he recruited the right kids, I shouldn't have to go get somebody out of the portal. It's my job to develop them and develop them into better players and better young men. And I think other than last year, I think a lot of people think Clemson's like in the dumps down. I don't think that's the case. I think they're going to bounce back this year. We'll get into that a little bit, but he's also won a national championship, been to 2. And again, I think that matters. I think he is. I still think he's a good football coach. I think his stubbornness is probably eventually going to cost him his job. But that being said, 10 years from now, I don't think anybody's going to turn around and say anything bad about Dabo. other than not using the transfer portal. His kids don't get in trouble. He's won a national championship. Like I said, I think at some point accomplishments have to matter too. He's one of only 2 guys on here that has one. So number 1, Kirby Smart. I do agree with both guys. Listen, what's going on in Georgia right now is not okay. I think it's crazy that it's not getting the national attention that it is, that it should. They have a little bit of a culture issue in Georgia. That being said, again, it's a win business, and he does it better than anybody right now. He's got debatably the best program in the country. He's got 2 national championships in the last 4 years. He's kind of the guy that kind of knocked Alabama off the top perch. That is no small feat in its own. And I think he's a good football coach. I think he's a good football coach in regards to what he does on sidelines, X's and O's. I think he's got to get his program in a little bit of order, though, because I think he continues to let it go the way it is. I do think something tragic is going to happen again. And I think if that happens, eventually somebody's really going to start paying attention. And I don't think it's a spotlight you want shined on your program, because if they start digging for that stuff, they'll find other stuff. And then I think it gets interesting. But if you're telling me, hey, you got to hire a coach and you got to go win a national championship in the first 2 years, it'd be really hard for me not to pick anybody but Kirby Smart right now. So that is my list.
All right. So as far as Dabo, I'm just going to touch really quick on, why I didn't have him on my list. Do I sound like I'm echoing?
No.
Not echo. You sound like a little far away, maybe.
Okay. Is that a little better?
Yeah.
So the reason I didn't put Dabo on my list is because, like I said, only 4 teams last season did not utilize the transfer portal. All right. And that's going to be Army, Navy, Air Force, all understandable. And then there's Clemson. 0 transfer portal, 0 players from the transfer portal. They lost 12. He did say that he has nothing against. It's not intentional. I say that's BS. He said that he was going after 4 offensive linemen that he really liked, and they when asked why he didn't get them, he said, "Well, they have to like you too. Just because you like them doesn't mean they're going to come to you." And to me, that's like, okay, so they just didn't like you. And like I said, so that's my opinion of Dabo Swinney. Is I guess he's not elevating his game as the college football is changing with the transfer portal. And like you said, that's going to hurt them. Over the last 4 years, they've been adding another loss to their season. They were 15-0 in 2018, 14-1 in 2019, 2 losses in 2020, 3 losses in 2021, and ultimately 4 losses last year. They're not getting better. So I don't think Dabo deserves a spot in the top 5 anymore, and that's why he wasn't on my list. But like I said, from his past accolades, I see why he's on your list, Bill, though, for sure.
Alex, I'm 100% with you there. Dabo, I think, was a good coach, but at the same time, you do have to adjust with the times. And I understand Dabo has been against NIL, and when you're grabbing guys out of the portal, especially like those top level guys, a lot of them are going to be interested in some of that NIL money, as they should be. I mean, they've earned that. So I can understand why Dabo doesn't want to do it. I disagree with it, but I can at least understand why he doesn't do that. But you can definitely see that with this being in college football, it's changed the success level that Dabo's had. I'm not saying Clemson has to every year be a team that goes 11-1 or 12-0 and goes to the college football playoff every year, but for a team that was as consistently dominant as Clemson was in the ACC, and I know Florida State was really good last year, but as a whole, the ACC has really been down the last 3-4 years. I mean, since, you always saw a great quarterback somewhere in that conference, whether it was Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson. Like, there was always something in the ACC, and I feel like Clemson had an opportunity to really become this dynasty. I'm not saying you got to win a national championship every year, but Clemson was a team that had the prowess to be perennial ACC champions, and that hasn't been the case since the game has changed and gone to like this NIL wave and having that transfer portal open. And so I really think that's going to ultimately do Dabo in. I think within the next 2 years, Dabo won't even be the head coach at Clemson anymore, because they're going to be looking to go in a different direction, because I think in 2 years, especially with the playoff being expanded to 12 teams, if he's not able to get that team to the playoff in either of those years, I think they are going to part ways with him and tell him it's time for a fresh start.
Don't disagree with that. I think Clemson is, I mentioned it with Kyle Whittingham. I think Clemson is one of the landing spots for him, possibly. So I think Clemson, I think if Florida doesn't win 9 games this year, I think Billy Napier is gone. I would love to see Kyle Whittingham in Florida and kind of, get a resurgence in that program. That program has kind of fallen on hard times, in the last decade or so. They really just haven't figured it out. But that college football is better when Florida's good. They're one of those teams, man. But I get the Dabo thing. Like I said, Dabo was the toughest person for me on my list. 3 of them were very easy, and it was a matter of Dabo, Kalen, Dan Lanning, and Mike Norvell, kind of where I wanted to go. Brian Kelly, Lane Kiffin, guys like that just weren't really under consideration for me.
Me either. Never even gave him a thought.
Wow.
Bro, Lane Kiffin, I would say before you put him on a top 5, he's more likely to land on top 5 underachieving list, if I'm being 100% honest.
Okay, well, I based my list off of today to the future, my top 5. That was my top 5. I wasn't going on past accolades.
But my point is, nothing in his past would show you that he's going to succeed. Bro, that guy has had opportunities at Tennessee, Ole Miss, and USC, and has gotten it done nowhere.
Yeah,
nowhere.
Until he got to Ole Miss. And now he's had 2 10-win seasons, which the program has never had. Has never had a 10-win season.
That doesn't matter.
He's in the SEC. How does that not matter?
Because if you're not an 11-win team, what you do in the SEC doesn't matter. You have to win that. You have to win that game every year.
Does he have an SEC championship game appearance? Does he have an SEC championship ring? Does he have a playoff appearance?
Now that Nick Saban is gone, the answer will be yes to all of those.
If he goes 10-1,
Nick Saban wasn't the gatekeeper though. Kirby Smart has figured out ways to get that done. We've seen A&M get it done against Bama before. We've seen LSU get it done against Bama. Like, you can't I get it. Saban is great.
We're still talking about the past. I told you from today forward, that was my top 5 list of the coaches. So today, and I even said that before I explained my list.
Listen, I think the Dan Lanning argument I'll at least listen to. Lane Kiffin is a notorious.
We all know Alabama wanted Dan Lanning over Kalen DeBoer. We all know that.
Okay.
There's a reason for that, so I can't put it.
I have no problem listening to the Dan Lanning argument. I don't have a problem with it being on anybody's list. I don't think he should be number 1 for a guy that's never won anything. But if you put him in the top 5, I have no problem listening to that argument. Lane Kiffin, I do. Lane Kiffin has won nothing anywhere. He hasn't left a program in better shape when he's left anywhere. And again, if you go 10-1 for the last 2 years and you're beating a down LSU team, a down Auburn team, and a Texas A&M team that was in disarray, and then getting smacked by Alabama, it's the same thing. Like that is again. I think if you ask anybody what is Lane Kiffin's Achilles heel, I think more often than not, the majority of the answers will be he can't win the big game. And that's not an SEC thing. That's everywhere he's been.
And you want to talk about ethics? Lane Kiffin will leave you high and dry in a heartbeat.
There's that too.
I mean, how many arrests has his players had compared to Kirby Smart? Are we compared apples to apples, or what are we?
I'm just saying. There? Ethics are ethics, so it doesn't have to be apples to apples.
It's not just players. I mean, you look at what he did to Tennessee. He then got fired on the tarmac from USC and left that program in shambles.
Well, that's cool because we all hate USC, so that's fine.
It's fine, but I mean,
again, though, you guys are still reflecting on past shit. I even specified from here on forward.
Here's the difference.
There's the way that he has the Ole Miss program set up. That program is going to be a problem for the foreseeable future.
You can
After
say
Jackson
that.
Dart goes to the league next year, who the hell's playing quarterback?
He has no quarterback.
He's going to utilize the transfer portal like a good coach does, and he's going to find someone like Oregon's been doing. While he develops an underclassman, he'll get someone from the transfer portal for next year.
I don't know if Oregon is
that's what he's
the
doing.
leg you have to stand on, but
he's living in the portal.
We talk about
that's not sustainable. You look at like, okay, who he brought in the portal. Also look at the guys that he lost in the portal. Like he's not even loyal to his own guys. How do you let what's his face walk out and go to Ohio State?
Clearly, there was something else that we don't know going on. Because you're right, Quinshon Judkins walking was absolutely crazy to me because he was probably the best player on your entire team, and Ohio State hit the jackpot by landing him. That's the nicest thing I'll say about Ohio State all year.
So correct. So if you're gonna say, yeah, there's stuff going on behind the scenes. Like it's always that way with Lane. And again, you keep talking about from now till the future. Okay, again. You could sell me Dan Lanning. Dan Lanning's turned out to be a great recruiter so far. He's done well in the portal. He's at least knocking on the door of going to a conference championship game and all that stuff. So
not going to have greatness.
You get, I mean, that's your word, not mine. But again, you could sell me that vision, and I have no problem buying it because he's trending that way. Lane is not. Lane's just doing what Lane does. Like it's no different. He just has a different decal on the helmet now. That's all it is. That's my problem with Lane. Dan Lanning, cool. That guy's on an upward trajectory. Does he get there? We'll see. But again, I could see that with my own eyes. I could see that he's building Oregon. He's getting the players. He's for the most part a very good on-field coach. I think he got out-coached twice by Kalen DeBoer last year. I firmly believe that. Lane Kiffin, everything I just said that's great about Dan Lanning, you can't say one of those with a definitive check mark next to it about Lane Kiffin.
Okay. That's all I got for you is okay, because we have taken way too much time talking about these damn coaches.
We got nowhere to go. It's Saturday morning, baby.
You're right. A poor man's Daniel Tosh. Jeez. Look, all I'm saying is I get he's had a less than stellar past, and I get that. But he is set up to change things around, turn things around for him. Pete Carroll, for example, I know this is way off base. Like Pete Carroll was in the NFL at one point. He was shit. He then went back to college, got better at coaching, went to the Seahawks, and was a perennial powerhouse. So I'm saying, like, just because they had crappy past doesn't mean they can't turn programs around. You just had to find the right spot. And I do think that Lane Kiffin is perfect for the Ole Miss University, and I think that there's going to be a problem for the future. So we'll revisit this list next year, and I'm probably going to still have him in the top 5. And you're going to have a little less arguments to throw my way, and they're going to be like, "Damn, Alex, you are an amazing analyst. How did you see this coming?" I'm going to be like, "I don't know, man."
Alex, this is the last thing I'll say about it. You said that he's perfect for Ole Miss. Do you know why he's perfect for Ole Miss?
Please tell me.
What did you say about 10, 15 minutes ago?
I've said so much. I don't even know.
You said, I believe you said Ole Miss hadn't had a 10-win team, and Lane's now done it twice. Is that a fact?
Yeah, 2 of the last 3 seasons. Yeah.
Okay, so with that being the case, he's perfect for them because they said, "Hey, you're the best we've ever had. We're okay with that. We're perfectly fine with you being the best we've ever had." Now we know you're not going to be, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Ryan Day, Dan Lanning, even for your argument's sake. We know you're not going to be that guy, but you get us 10 wins. I mean, hey, we're knocking on history here. You keep doing this, you'll be the best guy to ever be in this position in the program's history. So you keep doing that. You keep bringing us the flashy recruits. You keep underachieving. You keep making us money. You can stay here for as long as you like.
Not to go completely off the wall here, but I'm pulling up their schedule real quick because I want to see it.
Let's do it. I'll do the same.
All right. Week 1, Furman, that's a win. Week 2, Middle Tennessee, that's a win. Week 3 at Wake Forest, it's a win. Week 4, Georgia Southern, that's a win. Week 5 at home against Kentucky, that's a win. That'll be a close game. Week 6 on the road at Ole Miss. On the road at South Carolina. That's should win. Yeah. Could be a loss. Following week at LSU at night, that's a loss.
Maybe, depending on how quarterback plays. It's only 2.5 point spread right now. So
at home against Oklahoma, that should be a win. On the road against Arkansas, that should be a win. They're a couple years away. At home against Georgia, that's going to be a loss. on the road against Florida. Wow, so they duck Alabama this year.
Yep. Until the SEC championship game.
We'll get there next week.
I know. I'm jumping.
I promise you, they have 2 losses somewhere.
Okay, wait. Before we move on to ACC, just because we're looking at Ole Miss's schedule and I happened to see Florida, it reminded me. Did y'all see Florida's last 6 weeks of their schedule?
Bro, it's absolutely brutal. They have
Georgia, Texas, LSU, Florida, Ole Miss, and then Florida State. That is brutal.
No, it's brutal. If they don't start off hot, and I think Florida might have actually the toughest schedule in all of college football this season.
I think they do. Hold on, I'll pull it up.
Yeah, they start off against Miami to start it off. First off, and then Bill was saying if he doesn't win 9 games this season, he's probably gonna get fired. They may finish 4-8 this year.
Not bowl eligible.
There's 8 of these games that they could very honestly lose.
I'm telling you, Kyle Whittingham at Florida is a dream for them.
Kyle Whittingham won't go to Florida though because he's already said he's getting close to retirement, and Utah already named their head coach in waiting basically. So I don't know if he takes the start over.
Florida's got bags of money though.
This is true. Money talks.
So much money. Bring in Tim Tebow to be head coach.
Oh, no. God, no. They open against Miami. Week 2 is Samford. Week 3 is home against A&M. Week 4 away at Mississippi State. Week 5, home against UCF. I mean, they should be
3 wins there. They're going to lose to A&M.
At least 3. I could see them winning at home against A&M. Miami is probably the loss. I think that's neutral too. So, I could see them beating A&M at home though. A&M is going to be a little discombobulated still this year. So worst case they're 3-2. Then they go to Tennessee, home against Kentucky.
Those could be 2 losses.
They could be. They could go 1-1 there though.
Tennessee is 10.5 point favorites right now in that game. I know it's early, but opening lines are at 10.5.
They're home. They play Georgia and Jacksonville. That's going to be a loss. That'll be ugly. They go to Texas, and then
home against LSU.
Home against LSU. Home against Ole Miss. On the road against Florida State.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah, that might be the end of Billy Napier, which sucks because I actually had high hopes for him there. I thought he was going to be a good fit there, but
I did too.
Graham Mertz, time to step up.
Well, that's his biggest problem right there.
Facts. DJ Lagway, number 1 quarterback from the 2023 class. 2024 class.
Everything I've heard so far is Mertz is still going to start. So,
oh yeah, he will for sure.
I don't know why you just attach your wagon to that kid, but.
Hey, just like Wisconsin, if it hits the fan, you can make the switch. That is allowed. So,
all right. That's enough. So let's go. Yeah, that's enough because we're gonna get the big SEC is gonna be a big show next week, obviously.
Yes, sir.
2023 members and new members. So, didn't really lose anybody out of the core. This is. Depending who you talk to, still maybe kind of in limbo. Not for this season, but there's no mistake. There's no hiding it that Clemson and Florida State are trying to get out of the ACC right now. I don't know where they're going to go. That is what makes it interesting to me. The SEC has already said that they kind of are happy where they are and they want to stand pat of where they are. It doesn't make any sense for either one of those schools to go to the Big Ten. Are you leaving the ACC to go to the Big 12? I don't know. That's something we'll probably talk about next year because I think it's in court already. So if they really want to get out, I think they're going to get out. But I just don't know why you would be so anxious to get out with kind of really nowhere to go. But that being said, three new teams this year: Stanford, Cal. They were kind of the 2 teams left without a chair when the music stopped with the Pac-12 dissolved. And the interesting team for me, anyway, is SMU. A team that's kind of flown under the radar the last couple of years, won a bunch of games. Very exciting to watch if you haven't watched them. They are kind of aired out and throwing go routes every 3 plays. They offensively, they are fun to watch. Defensively, it's a little like flag football. Not the greatest. They need to build their defense a little bit, but SMU is the really interesting one here. And again, I would say football wise, I think they're the best out of the three new members. We'd love to hear what you guys think about it, but everybody else is kind of core members here. Not a lot of big shakeup here like there was in the Big 12 and the Pac-12. But SMU is the exciting. If I'm an ACC fan, SMU is the exciting one here. Stanford and Cal sucks. They're not good at football, and having to fly cross country maybe twice a year, depending on how the schedules work out, would not be fun to me if I'm an ACC school. So,
from a team standpoint, I definitely agree with you. I do think SMU is going to be the most interesting add here, but just from a talent standpoint, I mean, I think Cal's Jay Knott might be one of the best running backs in the entire conference this year. So I do think it brings at least an exciting factor there. Do you think he'll be able to run pretty good against a lot of these other teams? And then in the past, we've seen Stanford be good at football. Like, obviously, it hasn't been the case in a little bit of time, but I think
says Christian McCaffrey.
I think in the future we can see Stanford figuring out the right coach and bringing them. I'm not going to say all the way back to the Andrew Luck or even McCaffrey days, but we've seen them be good at football. So hopefully this move can be basically a step to the next chapter for them. But again, I mean, I don't think the ACC made any splash moves. I think, just going off of last week with the Big 12 ultimately made sense, the teams they added. I think they did a better job of who they added. But, I mean, I think the ACC, they did fine here. And I think this is going to open up a bridge to maybe even potentially go recruit players out in California now that you have them in your conference. So could be a good move in that aspect as well.
Yeah, I mean, I get the recruiting thing because it gives you a little bit of a footprint in California. I also think Cal and Stanford are such like one-off kind of situations because the academics part you need to get in there. I would say the average 5-star kid that you're recruiting out of California is probably not getting into Stanford or Cal. So it's a little bit of an advantage. I don't think they're going to see quite the prizes coming out of California to ACC schools as some might think, but it would definitely help. But sorry, Alex, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good, but I always love hearing your input because usually it tells me if my train of thoughts on the right track or not. But no, Katra, I love what you said about kind of opening up the California the California area for like better recruiting, especially with exposure from Stanford and California. And I think that's absolutely going to make the conference better. And then they definitely went out and I think they got one of the two top non-Power 5 schools last season. I think the top two teams would be SMU and Liberty, arguably as the two best teams in the non-Power 5. And so I think SMU would win in that matchup. So I think they got the best non-Power 5 team out there, which definitely is going to bolster the conference. SMU is someone I'm extremely high on this year. I'll definitely dig to them a little bit more. But like I said, kind of like Bill said, they're a very pass-heavy offense. They were 8th in points per game last season, 31st in yards per play. They did win the AAC's championship last year. But, one thing that's kind of really not talked about is actually their defense. In 2022, they were ranked 105th in yards per play, absolutely terrible. And they improved that to 6th in the nation last year. It's a huge improvement. In fact, only Penn State had more sacks than the SMU unit. The SMU had 47 sacks. Only Penn State had more. And they were 12th in the country in points given up per game at 17.4 points. I think they are primed and ready for this move to the ACC. And really, it's behind their offense, Preston Stone and his tight end, R.J. Maryland, who, had 518 yards last year, 7 touchdowns, and 6 of those coming in the last 7 games. I mean, there's a lot of star power on this SMU team that I think is going to cause a stir in the ACC. And then, with California, we were talking about, Florida's brutal schedule as far as who they play. Have you guys seen Cal's schedule, who they open up, or how their schedule has worked out?
I haven't seen it for this year.
Let me give you a brief breakdown. They have a home game to start off against UC Davis. Then they go to Auburn, right? After they go to Auburn, they come back to California to play San Diego State. The next week, they go back to Florida to play Florida State, and then they go back to California, and then they go out to Pitt, and then they come back to California. So in the first 6 weeks, they're traveling across country every single week. Like, you know how much travel that is, wear and tear on the body just from traveling? That's going to be like, Cal's schedule is brutal. Probably the worst schedule in college football as far as traveling ability, probably besides Hawaii. And like I said, so like as far as the new members, like I said, Stanford's a couple years away. I think they're starting to finally get their quarterback in place. SMU's going to make a splash, and Cal, they have probably the best running back in the conference, but that schedule and that how much travel as they're going to be doing, I think that's going to take a toll, and we're going to see that as the season goes on, the kind of impacts that's going to have.
Yeah. So, I mean, ACC, I think, is, like I said, I think there is 3 distinct teams that you could argue are going to win the conference this year. I think the difference between the ACC and the Big 12 so far, obviously, we haven't talked about the SEC or the Big 10 yet, but I think the mid-pack tiers, in the ACC are a lot stronger and have the ability to actually cause some havoc and pull some upsets and make this. I think that the scary part is I think it makes it's going to be a very fun conference to watch this year. I don't think you can just say, hey, we're going to go on the road and beat this team. I think if you look at the Louisvilles, the NC States, the Virginia Techs, and even Syracuse this year, they're not going to be, pushovers like they have been in the past. What hurts that though is I think at that point, I think you might only be looking at only having one team in the college football playoff at the end. Whoever wins the conference. If you're sitting there with 2 or 3 losses, you're probably only getting one team in. So be very curious to see how this plays out. I know we're getting into predictions and previews here now. But ACC is going to be very interesting this year. Very interesting with what goes on the field. And then on top of to see if Clemson and Florida State kind of get their freedom after the season's over and what they end up doing. Because like I said, I don't see a move that makes sense for them to leave where they are right now. That's just my opinion. I don't know how you guys feel about it. If the SEC already hadn't said no, then obviously, that would make sense. But they have, like I said, I don't think the Big Ten's looking to go to 18. And they just geographically don't make sense.
I mean, none of the Pac-12 schools make sense in either of those conferences either.
But it makes sense in another way that is between tradition, prestige, and obviously money that they're going to bring.
Not saying that the Big Ten and like the Pac-12 have like real rivalries, but at least knowing every year that you're going to have somebody from the Pac-12 and somebody from the Big Ten represent each other in like the Rose Bowl. I think that makes a ton of sense there. With Oregon's brand being as big as they are, they also just fit into the Big Ten because you have, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State that also have those big brands. Same things with Lincoln Riley at USC. Like, though, brand-wise, that makes sense. And then Washington, granted, they don't have anything traditionally that makes sense going over to the Big Ten. They're coming off of a lot of recent success. Like, we've seen them in the college football playoff, and we've seen them even national championship specifically just play a Michigan team. So, like, I do think it makes sense. It definitely doesn't make sense geographically, but I can at least see where the Big Ten was trying to go with the addition of those 4 Pac-12 schools. With Florida State and Clemson, like, I just ultimately don't think that they really have a leg to stand on right now. I think if they're smart, they just kind of try to play the waiting game and really ultimately see if the SEC is going to let them in. I know they already said no, but, things will get revisited. And, I just ultimately feel like those 2 schools have the prestige that's enough to get them in the SEC. It's just all going to be a numbers thing. I think both schools went about it the wrong way, and that's ultimately why the SEC said no. But I do think that these schools ultimately do end up in the SEC. And then just the last thing that I'll add here before we really get into the preview is that Bill, you mentioned something about like some of the mid-tier level teams, as you called them. I think that's really going to be really important in this conference because just looking at their schedules, I'd say that all of the favorites are just probably all the teams that we have in our SEC or ACC championship game. They probably are the team that have the hardest schedules to look at. Like you look at North Carolina or you look at NC State or even Syracuse, like their schedules are very favorable compared to a Clemson or Miami. So I'm really curious to see, you know, where everybody's heads at with that and, you know, how we see things falling.
Well, should we just jump in then?
You know what, Alex? I'm going to let you go first, brother.
Well, I just want to talk about, you know, obviously scheduling is going to be a huge part as far as conference matchups, non-conference matchups. You know, one loss in the conference can, you know, ultimately take you out of the running for either, you know, the ACC championship and a chance at the college football playoff. I mean, so when you look at these teams, I was kind of looking over the schedules, and Florida State, I don't know if this is brilliance or if it just happened to happen by accident, but I was looking at their schedule, and they start off their season with the first 2 weeks of the season as conference matchups. I'm pulling up their schedule right now, actually.
Georgia Tech week 1,
Boston College week 2. Right, so they start off early with their conference schedule, but then you jump through the end of their season. Now, what happened to Florida State at the end of last year? They had an injury problem. That injury problem is probably what ultimately kept them out of the college football playoff. I think we can all agree on that the opinion that without Jordan Travis, this team couldn't compete. Well, when you look at their schedule, their last 3 games of the year are non-conference scheduled games, which tells me that if they lose all 3 of those games and they qualify for the ACC championship, they could essentially rest their star players. Now, I'm not saying he would do that or that you can do that, but it gives them the opportunity where they can essentially eliminate injury risk late in the season. And I think that the ability to not have 3 must-win games at the end of your schedule, you know, in November, I think that that's going to play a huge part in the play out, how the season plays out, and that fact that Florida State's getting the conference play over with sooner. Do you guys kind of think I'm on the right path with this, or do you think it's just?
Listen, I don't know. I think we talked about this a little bit last week, or maybe we talked about it on Wire to Wire. I can't remember, but at some point, I think you're going to see it. Especially if you're in a Power 4. I think it could come down to like, hey, yeah, we're going to play Florida non-conference. We're already locked into the ACC championship game. If we win that game, we're guaranteed a top 4 seed. We already have a loss. Doesn't matter if 1 loss or 2 loss. If we win the ACC championship game, we're going to be a top 4 seed. This game doesn't mean crap now. Like, we're sitting everybody. And I think eventually, again, I don't know if you'll see it this year, but I think spots like that are going to come up, and you're going to see it because the bye week, getting that extra bye week between the conference championship and when the college playoff starts, I think is huge. These kids are never going to play this much football, you know, at this point in their lives until starting this year. So I do believe that at some point you're going to see coaches looking at it from a strategic standpoint and realize in the past, it's like, oh, you can't get that second loss because you still won't come in the top 4 no matter what happens, to, hey, as long as you win your conference, you're in the top 4. It doesn't matter if you have 4 losses. So, yeah, like if my quarterback's banged up or my running back's banged up or, you know, my star edge guy's banged up, I'm not going to play him. I'm going to sit him. And I think it's going to rub a lot of people the wrong way, but that is where we are now. That's the scenarios that we set up, you know, in improving the 12-team playoff. And I think people need to get used to it because I think if you're a head coach, at the end of the day, your job is to make championship games and go as far as you can in the college football playoff. That's his job. So,
yeah. And I get that. I think
you're going to see it.
But I also think that the one part that we're kind of like, I don't want to say glossing over, but you will still have group of 5 teams that could potentially compete for those top 4 seeds. If a group of 5 team is ranked higher than you going into like the final week of rankings and they win their conference, then ultimately they would be the one to get that 4 seed there. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be likely to happen or anything like that. However, I do think with Florida State, it would be one thing if they go into that game against Florida and they're undefeated at that point. I do think, you could potentially see someone being sat there. But if they're going into that game and they already have one, maybe two losses, and although they are guaranteed to go to the ACC championship game, I do think it will make a difference, because at that point, if you have one, maybe two losses and you're ranked like 8th, you go into Florida, you sit everybody, then you drop down to like 12 or let's say 11, 12, somewhere in that range. You go into the ACC championship game and it is literally a must win. It's like if you don't win, you're not getting in. But if you would have played that Florida team hard and just beat them going into the ACC championship game, you'd been ranked, maybe still at 8, maybe bumped up to 7 or 6, depending on how stuff fell that final week of the season. And rather, if you win or lose, you're still going to be locked into a guaranteed spot in the playoff, because you're going to finish in that top 12. So I do think it's going to be something that these coaches will have to monitor based on how the seasons go. But I also don't think that you can just play it that conservative at times. If you're one of these like high profile schools that know that you can make it as an at-large team, like me personally, I would like to have the insurance of, hey, if we go out there, we lay an egg, something happens, somebody gets hurt, whatever the case may be, we know we're still getting into the college football playoff, as opposed to putting all my eggs in one basket, knowing that I need to win this game to get in. Like, I'd rather my players play free, just knowing that, hey, no matter what happens, we're still going to college football playoff. We still want to win, but you don't need the anxiousness, all the nerves about, hey, if we lose, we're out. Like, I wouldn't want an elimination game for the ACC championship game if I'm a team like Florida, when I know I could have just taken care of business against a Florida team who, quite frankly, we're better than anyway. And if things go well, we're going to be pulling our starters by midway through the third quarter anyway.
I'm 100% with you. I don't think people are going to do willy-nilly. Like you said, I think it'll be strategic. I mean, and again, I think the perfect set of circumstances need to arise for it to happen. The only difference for me is, like I said, in the past, I don't think coaches would even consider it, and now I think it's a viable option. Like if you like Liberty sitting there 12-0 and they're like ranked 9th in the country, then yeah, you can, and you're Florida State and you already have a loss. Yeah, you probably can't afford to go 2 losses and just pray that the committee is going to put you above Liberty. But if you're sitting there 11-0 and your quarterback's got a really bad ankle sprain, and you're playing in the ACC championship game the following week,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you're probably not running them out there. So it's again, I think it'll be a case by case basis. The only difference is, like I said, I think in the past you didn't really have the choice, and now you can at least sit down and look at everything and be like, hey, if this does play out a certain way, we do have options here to not play certain people if they're significantly hurt. Obviously, week 13, everybody's pretty much banged up at that point, but I just think that the option and the choice will arise way more with the 12-team playoff, way more than it did so with the 4-team, because you pretty much had to be perfect to get in. And sometimes that didn't even matter. We saw that last year. So, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. I think coaches are going to look at it from, a realistic point of view, being like, hey, no matter what we do here, if we get in, we potentially still got to play 4 more games to win a national championship. How much of the rest week does it help my quarterback, or does it help my running back? You know what I mean? So that stuff's all going to be weighed that way. So it's going to be very interesting.
It'll be fun, that's for sure. I mean, I'm excited to see. I think it's smart scheduling on Florida State's part, especially being that the reason they were left out of college football playoffs last season was because of an injury like that late in the season. So it just kind of got me thinking this week at work. I was just like if they could technically sit all their stars for the last 3 weeks and still be good. Like, that's just crazy to me that's the kind of landscape we're in now. But also, you got to look at like teams like Clemson, who also have a scheduling advantage. They only have 4 games on the road this year on Clemson's schedule. I mean, that's definitely home field advantage for sure. Is that crazy to you guys? They only have to go on the road 4 times.
I don't think they're even the leader this year. I think Katra, how many away games do you guys have?
We go to Penn State. We go to Oregon. I think 5.
All right, so yeah, you see, it's not you guys. Maybe it's Penn State. I know we only have 8 this year, so it's not us. Some big team, maybe it is Penn State. I don't know who it is. Somebody has 9 home games this year. And I want to. I know it's somebody big.
Might be us. We go on the road 4 times.
So
we got 4. We got Michigan State, Oregon, Penn State, Northwestern. All of our other games are home.
So you're still 8-4 then. One of the big teams only has 3 away games. Maybe it's Notre Dame. Maybe it's Penn State. It's somebody big though. So
that's
no,
crazy,
I mean,
that's a lot of home games.
9's a lot. I mean, 9's a lot. 9 is an extra one. Majority of the time, big teams you get 8 because your conference schedule is split. Right. But all of your non-conference games are home unless you're playing another like huge school. So,
and then even then, it's probably going to be neutral.
Sometimes, yeah. Like we have 8 this year. We only have 7 next year because we go to Texas. But 9 is kind of rare. It's not super common. So yeah, I mean, not only having to leave your campus 3 times over the course of 4 months per se, it's definitely an advantage.
I mean, like I said, 2 of the teams that we've talked about as being perennial powerhouses in the ACC have definitely advantageous schedules this season, so that'll play out nicely. What do y'all think about Miami? I mean, I think Miami definitely won the off-season transfer portal battle as far as the ACC goes. I mean, bringing in some extremely top talent in Cam Ward, Damian Martinez. I mean, is Miami going to be? I mean, is Miami here to stay, or is this just a fluke Mario?
I think they have to be here at least for this year. To stay is going to be tough because you're not going to have Cam Ward or Damian Martinez after next season, just because NFL landscape wise. But I do think Miami is going to be a team that you definitely have to look out for. Look, we were talking about Cam Ward last season, and up until like week 6, week 7, like we were talking about him being in the Heisman contention. So I do think him going to Miami, being on a bigger stage, having more talent around him will definitely be beneficial for him. And then as far as Damian Martinez goes, as much as we covered the Pac-12 last year, Damian Martinez was always a guy that we showed love to coming from Oregon State. So I do think those two being in the backfield together, I mean, I'd go out and say that they're going to be the most dynamic backfield in college football, with those two right next to each other. So, I mean, I definitely think you have to give them some respect there, but it's really just going to come down to the guy at the helm. Alex, I know you hate him. Mario Cristobal is really going to be the X factor when it comes to what this Miami team does. If he can give you an ounce of just good, consistent coaching throughout the year, Miami's going to be a team that's probably in the ACC championship game. Now, for me, what I just think that Mario Cristobal has shown me who he is. When they lost the game last year that they had no business losing, they could have just kneeled on the ball and got out of there with the win. Miami was cruising at that point, and players had all the confidence in the world. That happened, and that's on Mario. That team lost all of its confidence, and they were a completely different team the second half of that year. That was a team that was looking like they could have, snuck into the ACC championship game and really have been a force. But they lost that game, and you could tell, like, they didn't believe in what Mario was doing anymore. So, again, I think they have the talent to be as successful as anybody in this conference, but Mario's got to figure it out. And if he doesn't, that's a job that's super appealing to everybody. You have great recruits in Florida. They'd get somebody else to fill that position in a heartbeat. So I do think this will be a major year for Mario in that Miami program.
I will definitely echo a lot of what Cottrell said. I think they have all the ability in the world. Again, I think they're one of the top 3 teams. I mean, I think for the most part, I mean, I think everybody's championship matchup should be some combination of Miami, Florida State, and Clemson. If you have somebody else in there, that's a little bit more of a kind of sneak in type pick. But talent wise, they're there. I mean, they've had talent for the last couple of years. They haven't been able to hold down the quarterback position, which has been an issue. They went through a couple guys. They thought Tyler Van Dyke was going to be the guy. He's out of there. He didn't get along with Mario at all. They brought Cam Ward in. To Cottrell's point, after week 6, Washington State was 6-0, and we were like, how is he not a top 5 Heisman guy? He's destroying it. And they proceeded to, I think, lose 3 games in a row, and that was kind of that. But Cam Ward is definitely a guy that's going to, elevate that program and that offense. And then Martinez is great. I mean, that kid, as long as he stays out of trouble, he's one of the best backs in the country. So, yeah, the offense should look better this year. Sorry. But to Cottrell's biggest point, Mario Cristobal, he can't have a James Franklin moment. You can't lose a game like that to Georgia Tech where you play terrible, fight all the way back, and then win it, and you're going to pull one out and be like, all right, we survive and go to next week and then lose it. And then, like Cottrell said, you saw the team just pretty much crumble after that. That was their second loss. They knew their season was kind of over, and it got ugly from that point out. So he's got to right the ship, and he's got to reinstill the confidence in those kids in that room that he's going to do the best coaching job he can and do the things that he should do and help them win football games. I don't care what sport it is. If you got you can have the most talented kids in the world. If they're looking at the guy, steering the ship and they don't believe in him and they don't trust him, it ain't going to work. It's not going to work. Especially nowadays with kind of attitudes that certain players have. They'll just they'll go off script and think they know better themselves. So I think he's got a lot of work to do with all the kids coming back from last year, plus what he brought in. But talent-wise, they're there. Like I said, I think if you look at it on paper, they're just as good as Clemson and just as good as Florida State. It's gonna depend on how they play and what happens between the sidelines. And I think the one area where they are definitely third is coaching. I would take Dabo and Mike Norville over Mario Cristobal all day. So that is their weakness. Like I said, I think a lot of it falls on him. And to Cottrell's point, I think with the amount of resources they've pumped into that program in the last couple of years, like they're building new buildings. They have, it's not really hard to convince a kid to go to Miami. If we're being honest, it's warm, it's tropical. There's women everywhere. They're doing good in NIL. It's not a hard sell. So if Mario doesn't get it done, they will go get somebody else to bring down into that program and coach that team. So Miami is very intriguing to me. Like I said, I think they're in the top three.
I think Miami has the highest ceiling in the ACC this year, for being honest. I mean, they were returning 68% of their production from last year, and their two weakest positions they've upgraded significantly. I mean, Cam Ward threw for just under 4,000 yards last year, 25 touchdowns and only 7 interceptions, where Van Dyke, he had 12 interceptions, 9 of which coming in their 5 losses last year. So he was a huge reason behind a lot of their losses last season. And their leading rusher only had 625 yards last year, and they're bringing in Damian Martinez, who just had an 1,100-yard season and just under 1,000 yards 2 years ago. So they've definitely improved their run game and their passing game, in one offseason cycle. So this team is definitely going to compete. And I think Miami, especially with their schedule, they play Florida State, but other than that, they don't play Clemson. They don't play, I just had it up, but they have a very light schedule as far as getting through the ACC. I mean,
they got Louisville on the road, and that's really it.
So
that's the only other.
It's always a tricky game. It's always a tricky game going to Louisville. Is that like a Saturday? Like, God forbid it's like a Thursday night game.
No, it's a Saturday.
All right.
But Miami gets them coming off a bye. So, I mean.
Yeah, see.
But also, you bring up Louisville, man. Like, Louisville lost so much this year. Like, if this was last year's Louisville team, I'd say that's going to be a hell of a game. But you lost Jawar Jordan. You lost freaking Jamari Thrash. You lost Jack Plummer to NFL. You got Tyler Shug in there, who's a journeyman from Oregon and Texas Tech. I mean, this is not the Louisville team that we've been used to watching. So I don't think that's even going to be a game even.
You're right. You're right there. But Alex, here's the thing. I know you, and you're hyping up Miami, and you're telling us how good they should be. I know for a fact that you don't have Mario Cristobal in the ACC championship game. So I think it's been fun going over all of this, but I know.
What if I do?
I know you. I know you don't have them.
Okay. This does seem like a build them up so they fall even further. So
it's
Alex can sit back and cackle and be like, he did it again.
I'm gonna read this text message I sent to you last night. Last year, I held back a lot of personal opinions to sound more mainstream, but I'm not going to do that this year. Tomorrow is going to be a wild show. So just wait
that.
to the
I
end of this
get that.
preview, and we're gonna see who's in my.
I
Y'all
know.
mine's gonna be blown. Who's in my ACC?
I understand that, but I'm telling you, I know it's not Miami because
Okay.
I think you're building Miami up so high up on this pedestal. You're like, there's no reason why they shouldn't go 11-1, but
So
this team's going to finish 8-4, and it's going to be all Mario's fault, and he should get fired because he's a horrible head coach. He's a horrible human being, and I hope he never gets another job again. Like, I feel like that's what you're setting me up for, and I'm not buying it, Alex. I'm not buying it.
I'm going to say this. Justin Louder just put a comment up. There will be a game or two he will drop that he shouldn't. It's what he does. Couldn't agree more. He is in that same category as James Franklin. He's in that same category as Lane Kiffin. Sorry, it's what it is. It's what it is. There's a game I guarantee you there's a game on that schedule that you just scroll by it every single time. You're like, win, 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 and it will be a loss. That is what those guys do. That is what separates them from elite to very good football coaches. Sorry, it's what he does. Justin Louder's 100% right. He's in that same boat as all of them. Same boat.
Who are you most excited to watch though? Like in this when you look at these teams, obviously besides Clemson, Florida State, Miami, like what team has like really grabbed your attention the most that you're excited to see this year?
Go ahead, Bill. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
All right. So I was gonna say for me, I got two. One of them being NC State. I think NC State did a great job of cleaning up in the portal. They got Grayson McCall, quarterback out of Coastal Carolina. So you bring in a vet there. And then you also get Duke starting running back in Jordan Waters. I think that's going to be huge because these were two positions where, NC State didn't have a lot of stability last year. And I think bringing in these guys, they also brought in Noah Rogers, receiver who's a 5-star kid coming out of his recruiting class. Like, I think you bring that in while also bringing back 6 starters on offense. I think that gives them a shot to be really good this year. The problem is that NC State has only won more than 10 games once in their entire history. So just erring on the side of history here, I don't know how good or, what threshold that NC State team can cross. But I think their offense could be one of the most prolific in the entire conference just because of, what they have coming back, but also what they add out of the portal. And then the other team that I really like is Syracuse. It sounds weird being how down I was on Kyle McCord. It's not that I ever thought that Kyle McCord was a bad quarterback. I just didn't think he had what it took to run our offense. I think going over to the ACC, where, the standards are going to be a little bit – it's different going up against Michigan's defense as opposed to going up against Miami's defense or going up against North Carolina's defense, things like that. So, for me, I think Kyle McCord can go there and have success. And the other thing is that I love what they did in terms of who they hired to take over that program. Fran Brown's going to be a first-year coach coming from Georgia. He was working there with Dan Lanning while Dan was still there, being under him, learning that defense, and then ultimately learning from Kirby Smart. And he's got 2 national championships already under his belt. And I think Syracuse has a really light schedules. Just me looking at their schedule, I think they really only have 2 tough games all year. And that's going to be home versus Miami, which, again, I could see Mario going up to the Dome and dropping a game like that. And then they have another one where they have to go on the road against NC State. I think those are going to be the toughest games of the year for them. I think we're looking at the Syracuse team that could really come out of nowhere and ultimately end up with just 2 losses and maybe be in the AC championship game. So those would be the 2 for me that I'm like looking out for outside of those top dogs in this conference.
So I will say this. NC State, I think me and Cottrell have actually been pretty high on NC State the last 2 years with who they had. And I feel like they get to the precipice of like knocking on the door to becoming like a 10 or 11 win team. And they were like, nah, just kidding. We're going to stay here. And it's like they have like crazy like freak losses. And they just sit there at the end of the year and they're 9-3. It's just it's weird. I do like NC State again. They're not my official dark horse. Syracuse. I'm not as high on Syracuse as Cottrell is. I think
he's got a good point about the schedule, though. He's got a great point about that.
He does, and I know they got Kyle McCord, who I think is a very competent quarterback. I think he got a role deal in Ohio State. Not going to really get into all that because I don't feel like arguing with Cottrell. But I don't know how the rest of that team's going to be. I do like the coaching hire. I just feel like they're probably still going to be a year away. Because I feel like for them to get any kind of serious consideration, I think they have to run the table. And I just feel like they're going to lose a game somewhere. And I think once they do, I don't know. It's very far fetched for me to sit here as we sit here right now before seeing them play to say that Syracuse can win the ACC. That's just a lot for me. But I don't know. Like I said, we'll see. We'll see what happens. My dark horse, though, and this is going to be the kind of, I think, my dark horse darling for the year in all of college football. If I'm being honest, I'm going with Virginia Tech. I think Brent Pry is kind of has finally turned the corner and kind of got that program headed back to where it was under Frank Beamer. He returns 11 of 12 starters on offense and 8 and 12 on defense. He's replacing one offensive lineman. That's it. Starting quarterback, running back, top 3 receivers. Everybody is back from a team that won 5 of its last 7. Started playing with confidence at the end of the year last year. A defense that was already good should be better. It should be very senior, leadership laden type defense this year. Like I said, returning 8 of 12 starters. Two of the other starters are kids that he got in the portal. I think Virginia Tech, we've seen them before in the past. Going to Blacksburg, they're going to have one Thursday night game against somebody. They always do. And Blacksburg's not an easy place to go and win. It's not. I think that school will be very excited about that football team this year. I think they're very good. I think they're very under the radar right now. I would not be surprised at all if Virginia Tech is in the ACC championship game. That is kind of going to be my underdog pick for the year out of all the conferences. I think Virginia Tech is the most under radar team in the country right now, in my opinion.
That is a great pick, Bill. Before I talk about my dark horse, I do love Virginia Tech and their running back. What's his name? Bashul. Bashul Tutin, I think his name. 860 yards last year. He had 1,300 yards as a sophomore, and he's got 58 catches, so he's really underrated as a pass catcher out the back, but that's a huge part of his game as well. Virginia Tech will be fun to watch. It'll be nice to see them kind of be in the forefront of the ACC again. I remember back in the day when I first started watching college football, Virginia Tech, when they had Michael Vick and Frank Beamer as the head coach, and they had the best special teams in the land. I want Virginia Tech to be back because it's great for college football. But who I'm excited to watch this season is a couple of actually transfers. The first transfer, I'm excited to see what Malik Murphy can do at Duke. Obviously, Duke lost Riley Leonard. They lost their leading running back as well. But you got Malik Murphy transferring in from Texas. He only saw a couple of games last season, off the bench when Quinn Ewers got injured. But he does have a lot of raw potential, and I think it'll be interesting to see what he can do on that Duke offense. I don't think this team is really going to compete for the ACC championship, but I think as far as the biggest question marks in the conference, I think Duke's got to be one of the biggest question marks due to, like I said, the new quarterback, losing the running back, losing their starting quarterback to Notre Dame, who we need to talk about still as well. But I think the player that I'm most excited to watch, it actually is the quarterback for Boston College. I think he's this year's Jaden Daniels. I think he's going to be one of the most fun to watch. Not as far as Heisman winning caliber, as far as like passing and running ability. His name is Thomas Castellanos. He had 2,200 passing yards last year and 1,100 rushing yards. He led the team in both categories. He ran for 13 touchdowns and threw for 15. Like I said, this kid, if he can make any sort of leap from last year and improve on his on his passing game, honestly, I think he could have a Jaden Daniels type video game numbers. But that's who I'm excited to watch as far as players go. But if I'm going to put a dark horse label on any team in the ACC this year, it's going to be SMU. I'm extremely happy that SMU went to the ACC. Like I said, I already touched on earlier with their eighth in the country in points per game. They do return Preston Stone, who threw for 3,200 yards last year. He's only sacked 12 times, and 4 of his last 6 games, he didn't throw for. He threw for more than 2 touchdowns. And then 2 games that he didn't throw 2 touchdowns were games that they lost. So he really, when he goes, the team goes. It's unfortunate he got hurt last year because he was on an absolute tear. In the first half against Navy, he had 322 passing yards before getting injured, and he finished up with 28 touchdowns through the air and 6 interceptions. And they're returning all 3 of their running backs from last season, and they combined for 1,700 yards. So even though they are a pass-first offense, they still have a 3-headed backfield that can cause havoc. And then that defense, I talked about them earlier. I'm going to mention it again. Only gave up 17.4 points per game last year, 12th in the country. They're returning a lot of talent. And keep an eye on R.J. Maryland, who I think is going to be the best tight end in the country this season. He had more yards per catch last year than Brock Bowers did. This guy, I think, is one of the most underrated players in the country, and look for him to have a big year. Like I said, 7 touchdowns last year. I look for him to get double digits this year and closer to that 1,000-yard mark. But I think SMU is going to be the team that may sneak into the ACC title game and stir up some feathers in the ACC. And when you look at their schedule, it's hard to argue with me.
For what it's worth, I don't even know if he's going to be the best tight end in the conference. I love Oronde Gadsden from Syracuse. Great tight end there. So, I mean, I'm with you, Alex. I think he's going to be one of the best tight ends in the country, but I think, unfortunately, the best one resides in Michigan. But I mean, ACC does have some pretty good tight ends as a whole.
Listen, he's very good, but best tight end in the country resides in Ann Arbor for this year, anyway. All right, it's 11:30. We've had a lot of fun on the show. I can't believe we gave the ACC this much love. We got to get moving a little bit here. So we've done our dark horses. I like that we've highlighted 5 other teams, which is great. Because I again started the show and I truly believe it. I think this league has a lot of parity this year. I think we might end up with 2 powerhouses in the final, but I think it's going to be chaos on the way there. Which again, I think the ACC is going to be very, very, very exciting this year. I think it will be on the same level as the SEC and the Big Ten. I think you're going to see upsets. I think you're going to see crazy games. And if you're an ACC fan and you're trying to grow your brand, nationwide and kind of elevate and try to keep up with the big 2, that's what you want. You want those type of games on TV, those highlights on TV. Not necessarily losing a game because you didn't kneel the ball. I'm just talking about last second victory, stuff like that. Big upsets. I think that's all capable of happening this year. I really do. I think the ACC is wide open. But that being said, gentlemen, let's get to our championship picks. Who do you have in the final? And who do you ultimately have winning?
You're on the roll, Bill. You might as well go first.
All right. I will go first then. I hate to say it. I'm going to go chalk here. Even everything after I just said, I think that's still all going to happen. I just think it's going to happen to everybody. I'm going to go Clemson as my one team, mainly because we talked about their schedule. I think with Cade Klubnik coming back, I also think Dabo kind of knows the writing is starting to kind of become very visible on the wall. His back's against the wall a little bit. I do like what they have coming back offensively. I think that offense will look more consistent this year. I think they'll be able to throw the ball a little bit better. Their defense is always good at Clemson. It's the one side of the ball you never have to worry about. I think Clemson gets there. And I'm going to go with Florida State. I think Mike Norvell, I think he's going to have those kids hungry. I think they're going to have that huge proverbial chip on their shoulder after what happened to them last year. I think they're going to be hungry. It's going to be kind of a revenge tour thing. As long as he can get consistent play out of DJU at the quarterback spot. I think with the talent they have outside and running back, lost a little bit in defense. I think the defense has to gel pretty quick at the beginning of the year and get their footing. I'm ultimately just going to go. I'm going to go with Clemson and Florida State in the final. Again, I think Miami has a chance to get there. I think Virginia Tech has a chance to get there. I think NC State has a chance to get there. And I'm not going to discount Syracuse. I think they're the longest shot of those teams. But again, looking at the conference as a whole, and I wouldn't count out SMU either. That's 6 or 7 teams that I think wouldn't be surprised if I woke up in November and be like, hey, the championship game is blah, blah, blah against blah, blah, blah. As a football fan, that's awesome. That's an awesome thing to say. So, ACC, I think the ACC is going to be fun to watch. So, I'm going to stick with Clemson and Florida State though.
I'm also going with Florida State here. I think Florida State's got the best offensive line in the entire conference. Bringing in a vet quarterback in DJ Uiagalelei, I think that's going to be big for them. They've also got talent at running back. They got Jalen Lucas there. They got Malik Benson out wide. I think the offense is going to be just fine. You talk about the defense, and yes, I do think the defense lost a lot of key players there, but I also think they bring back a lot as well. I like what they have on their defensive line. I think Florida State's going to be able to get after the quarterback. And just in general, I think they're the most talented team in the conference. So I'm rolling with Florida State to ultimately go to the ACC championship game. And then the team that I have them playing, I'm going with the dark horse here. I'm going with Syracuse. I think the way that their schedule is all set up, I ultimately think Syracuse only loses one game all year, and I think it's going to be when they go to NC State. I think when Miami goes to Syracuse to play that game, that's going to be the game we're going to be looking at is, oh, wow, Mario really gave that game away. And I think he's going to get out-coached there. So I think with Syracuse's schedule being as light as it is, they will have the ability to potentially run the table. But the nice thing is that they don't have to run the table to go to the ACC championship game. All they got to do is, somehow escape that schedule with one loss. You beat either Miami or NC State. You're going to all but guarantee your spot in going to that game there. So I like Syracuse to do that. But ultimately, I like Florida State to come out as your ACC champions and represent the ACC in the college football playoff.
I like it. So I really thought a lot about this, especially about Florida State. And when I look at their roster, obviously they returned a lot of talent, but they also lost a lot of talent. And I don't think that they improved their quarterback position enough or even got it up to the same par as what Jordan Travis did last year. And that's the most important position on the field. So I don't think Florida State is going to be able to make it to the ACC championship game this year. I think they're going to have some holes that are going to reveal themselves early on in the season with their early ACC schedule. And then, so I don't think they're going to make it. Right. And then we got, let me see, who else was it? Oh yeah, Clemson. So Clemson, Cade Klubnik, obviously 19 touchdowns, 9 interceptions last season. A lot of their offense went through Will Shipley, and they are returning Phil Maffa, who was a leading rusher last season. But again, Clemson, I'm not really sold on Dabo. I think that his coaching tactics and techniques are for the past. So I'm going to say something here that I dread saying. I absolutely hate saying it. But I think for me, the two teams that I think are going to represent the ACC in the championship game are going to be Miami. Yeah, I said it, Miami. Mario Cristobal has done enough in the offseason to improve this team enough to make them, in my mind, the favorite in this conference. They probably have arguably the best quarterback in the conference, and they have at least top 3 running back in the conference. Obviously, there's a couple other running backs at North Carolina and Cal that may have something to say about that best running back in the ACC topic. But I think Miami is going to do what they need to do to make it to the ACC championship with a very light schedule. And they're going to be joined by none other than newcomer and my personal favorite, my darling for the year, the SMU Mustangs, baby. So they're coming in hot to the ACC, coming off an AAC championship. They bring the right pieces. I'm not saying that SMU is going to be a powerhouse in the ACC for years to come or that they're even going to compete after this year. But the talent that they have on that team, on the offense and the defensive side of the ball, is literally the perfect storm for them entering the ACC this year. And I think they have the talent and the willpower and the coaching behind them to be able to push through the soft schedule. If I'm looking at SMU's schedule, they really don't play anybody, which is going to allow them to kind of skate through to this championship game. It's going to be Miami versus SMU. I do think that Miami ultimately does win the ACC championship this year and does represent the ACC in the college football playoff. So take that, Cottrell. I was not hyping you up. I'm just hype on Miami, just not the coaching staff. But the players, I'm a player-first guy, and I think that Miami has the best players in the right positions to get them to the college football playoff this year and win the ACC championship.
So who do you have winning it?
Miami beats SMU, but I think, like I said, it's a perfect storm for SMU as far as talent's ability on the field. And like I said, the ACC is so widely spread as far as talent goes that this could be a year that a newcomer makes some noise.
All right, so I know we got to talk about Notre Dame here. And real quick, I went ahead, made a list of what I thought the 5 best games in the ACC would be. So I got it together here. I threw in Notre Dame on here so we can kind of just, roll with that too. But here we are. You got Notre Dame playing Florida State week 3. Not week 3, but I think it's in November. But I think this is going to be probably Notre Dame's toughest challenge throughout the entire season. But I just wanted to touch on Notre Dame here real quick. They had a game first week of the year. They have to travel to to College Station to play Texas A&M. Later in the year, obviously the matchup against Florida State, and then of course they end the year with USC. Outside of that, though, I don't see any other teams that would have the potential to be ranked throughout the year. So don't even necessarily have to, go into full detail about those games. How I feel about Notre Dame is pretty simple. I think they're going to be a 10-2, maybe an 11-1 team that's going to have all this hype around them, probably be 6, 7, 8 seed going into the playoff. I think if they don't make the playoff this year, Marcus Freeman needs to be fired because there's no reason why they shouldn't. This should be an at absolute max 2-loss team. And if Notre Dame's a 2-loss team with 12 teams going to the playoff, there's no way that they wouldn't get in my opinion. So I think they will go into the playoff, but I do think this will be another year of Notre Dame being overrated because we won't know really the true extent of how good this football team is until that first round of the college football playoff.
The only little bit of pushback I'm going to give you on this is this: if they lose to Texas A&M, where's that Florida State game? Is that Florida State or is that something?
No, it's at home.
All right, so if they go to Texas Station and lose at home to Florida State and they sit there at 10-2, I don't know if they get in. I really don't. I mean, I think it would really depend on what everybody else around them does. They won't have a signature win then. They're going to have wins over Army, Navy, and a bunch of. They're not going to have. They probably won't have a ranked win.
Can I be 100% honest with you?
Sure.
We saw this exact same thing with Oregon last year, and we saw how high they were rated.
I get it, but
But that's not even a dig. That's not a dig at Oregon.
I get it.
Precedent-wise, I do think Notre Dame, we know how big of a brand they are. If they lose to A&M and A&M is ranked somewhere within the top 25, and I'd assume Florida State's also going to be in the top 25, regardless of if Notre Dame deserves to be there or not, we know every year Notre Dame gets this push. Last year they had no business being ranked when we were going over them, talking to week 8, week 9 of the regular season when they had already had 3 losses. So Notre Dame always gets this push. I think the bias plus they're going to be a 10-win team. That's why I think that they'll ultimately be ranked that high.
I think 10 wins is going to be a big number, and trust me, dude, nobody's more familiar with the Notre Dame push than anything else. I mean, if they beat Texas A&M week 1, you'll have a bunch of Looney Tunes saying they're the best team in the country and they should be ranked number 1 because that's what they do. But the only difference I would say this year is going to be, I'm hoping anyway, I really think the committee, with not having the pressure of only getting to 4 teams, I think from 4 down, I think those teams are going to get a way more comprehensive look. And I really think certain selections are going to surprise people at the end of the year. I really think they'd be able to sit down at that point and they'd be all right, well, who didn't, if there's another, another team that's 10-2 from a Big 5, a Power 4 conference, excuse me. That's the other thing that hurts Notre Dame. They have no conference championship game. I would say if they are 10-2, I think they're probably down around the 9, 10, 11 seed. I really do. I think the committee will be like, yeah, we'll put them in, but they haven't beaten anybody. Their resume is very weak at that point. I don't know who else is on their schedule, but Justin made a joke about Army, Navy, Coast Guard, and Space Force. But I mean, Army, Navy are definitely on there, I'm sure.
They are.
The game I'm looking to is that Georgia Tech game. They have to go to Georgia Tech. I'm not saying Georgia Tech is going to be a world beater, but with a dynamic quarterback like Haynes King, and going on the road to Georgia Tech, that could be a game that they could stumble on in the middle of the season as well.
Again, I just don't think Georgia Tech moves the needle for Notre Dame. I mean, again, I'm not saying you're wrong, Alex. I agree with what you're saying, but if
No,
Notre
man,
Dame
I think
goes,
that loss eliminates them. Like I think that's a game that they can
oh
lose
yeah,
very easily, then put them
yeah,
at a 3-loss team without even batting an eye.
yeah. Well, I mean, we'll
So
get
I
to
mean,
Notre Dame here in a
where do
second.
you guys have them then? Where do you got? Because like I said, I got them being 10-2, making the
Are
college
they,
football playoff.
are they playing USC?
They do play USC
The
Where's
last
that
game of the
at?
year, right?
at USC.
It's interesting.
Notre Dame's 3.5-point faves right now. Again, super early.
So listen, I start out the year every year being like, I'm not going to get sucked into Notre Dame again, and then I watch them play, especially at the beginning of the year, and they look great, and then I convince myself that they're better than they are. I do the same damn thing every year. That being said, roster wise, and coach, I like Marcus Freeman. I think he's a good coach. I agree with Cottrell. I think if they stumble this year and they don't make the playoff, I think it's gonna be hard for him to keep his job. I know they brought in Riley Leonard to supplant, Sam Hartman, who they thought was going to be the savior last year. I look at Notre Dame kind of very similar to Penn State, if I'm being 100% honest. I think they're going to have a good quarterback. I think they have good running backs. I think their offensive line is not going to be as dominant as it usually is. They lost Joe Alt. I can't remember the kid's name, but he was supposed to replace him. They were very high on him. He was a 5-star freshman. He tore his pecs. He's out for the year. He did that last week. So they're going to be one short on the offensive line. They're going to have a very good defense. They always do. They are literally a carbon copy of Penn State for me. I think they're going to struggle to throw the football. They have their top 5 pass catchers from last year are gone. They have very little experience on the outside. I know Riley Leonard's great. I don't know what Riley Leonard's going to look like in a more contained system as well. I think at Duke, he was kind of like, hey, just go make a play. Like, I think he had a lot more freedom at Duke that he's going to in Notre Dame. And
Well, Bill, if I could stop you right at that point. They did just get a new offensive coordinator from LSU, Mike Denbrook. So he may open it up a little bit with Riley Leonard's playing style. He may not be as contained as previous quarterbacks. I'm not a huge Riley Leonard fan, so I'm agreeing with you. I don't think he's the savior by any stretch of the imagination. He's definitely a bridge quarterback in my mind. I'm not a huge fan of his, but I think that they will allow him to kind of be his normal playing style stuff as far as running the ball, passing the ball, all that stuff. I don't think it's going to be a playing style issue.
I think he's very good. I think he's getting a bump because he went to Notre Dame. I don't think to your point, I don't think he's the savior. I think he's very good. I think he'll make plays that will make you go, wow. I think that's why we all loved watching him play at Duke last year. Yeah. He was single-handedly keeping them in games. He's also going to make some throws that are going to make you bang your head against the wall. And I don't know, you do them in the wrong game. I think Notre Dame is going to struggle to score points. I think their defense is going to win them a lot of games. I think if they get to 20 points, 24 points in a lot of games, it's probably going to be enough to win. Is that going to be enough against USC? Is that going to be enough against, Texas A&M and I guess Florida State? I don't know. That defense is very good. It's going to be a top 10, top 15 defense. It's going to be very good. But I don't think Riley Leonard makes them have this huge margin of error that a lot of people think they do. I think they're going to be in a lot of close games this year. I really do. So, until I see USC play, I can't say they're going to beat Notre Dame because they just refuse to tackle people. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, they've gone through 2 straight years of just being a gaping hole of a defense. So until I see that change, I don't think USC can beat them. So yeah, I mean, worst case, they're probably 10-2, and then I agree with Cottrell. I mean, they probably get in, but I think they get in lower than most people would expect. I guess that would be my point.
Alex, playoffs or no playoffs for Notre Dame?
I'm going to say no.
Ooh, it's a 2-1 there.
No, I think 3 losses, and I think that they're lost to Georgia Tech. I think that they lose to USC. I think they lose to Florida State. And who is it they play week 1? I think they lose to A&M. So that could be a 4-loss team. Depending on what kind of A&M team we see on the field week 1.
I mean, we're going to talk about A&M next week. A&M is A&M is fascinating for this year, I guess, if we're being honest. I don't know what to expect from A&M, but we'll talk about them next week. But let's go over these games. So Florida State, obviously, Clemson is going to kind of be maybe the preview of what we get at the end. So if you're on the left side, are they the home teams, Cottrell?
Yes.
Okay. So that's in Tallahassee. That's gonna be a big game. It's pretty early too. So allows kind of either whoever loses that game, it allows them to kind of rebound. We've already talked about Clemson's schedule. I think Clemson can lose that game, to make it to the ACC championship, because I don't know if they have another loss on their schedule. Miami, Florida State, rivalry game, a very storied rivalry game. Been very one-sided in the most recent bias, but Miami is kind of on their way back up. Very interesting game there. I guess that'll probably be in Hard Rock, I would assume, unless they're playing neutral. I don't think they are though. That's a big game. It's a hated rivalry game. I just feel like Florida State finds a way to win that game. Notre Dame, Florida State.
Well, let's not ignore the fact that the Florida State Clemson game is going to be DJU going back to Clemson. Like that's going to be a heavy storyline. That's going to be a great game to watch.
It's in Florida State.
Oh, sorry. So Florida State. So I was reading it the other way around. Okay.
Teams on the left are home. So
okay, never mind.
But to get back to DJU, I mean, the Florida State going into Notre Dame, his first career start ever. He went to Notre Dame and upset them at Clemson. So that's kind of what started this whole, DJU to the moon narrative. We went in there and played great. Florida State's got a tough schedule, man. Louisville, Miami. Again, I think this is a possibility of a hiccup game. I know we talked about Louisville losing a lot. I think Miami again. I feel like the last couple of years. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I just feel like the last couple of years, Louisville has caught everybody at home, and just once a year they beat somebody they're not supposed to beat. And again, we've talked about Miami and Cristobal struggles. I think it's a game that's rightfully highlighted. I don't think that's an easy trip for Miami. I really don't. And then Louisville at Clemson, that game at home. Again, if this was reversed, I would kind of sit on the same narrative as I did the game before. But I think Clemson at home takes care of Louisville. So that's my take. That's my take on these five. So obviously, you guys
for what it's worth here, Clemson and Louisville being at 5, like that's how difficult it was to pinpoint a game in the ACC that was going to still be viable. So that, I mean, if, like you said, Bill, Florida State does probably have the toughest schedule amongst all the team, all the top teams you expect to be there at the end. But I mean, if you're getting Clemson and Louisville as probably your 5th most interesting game in the conference, then I mean, there was other games as well that, I looked at, Virginia Tech, just the rivalry that's there, and just other games like that. But that's ultimately where we're at right now. I'll go over these here real quick. Number one, most fourth that I'm looking to watch in the game is definitely going to be that Florida State versus Clemson game. All the storylines that are in it, in that themselves. DJU going up against his former team there in Clemson. I also think that's going to be one of those games that really sets the tone for the season. If Florida State can go in there and dominate that game and really just put Clemson to bed early, I think that's going to put Florida State in a position to not only just be considered one of the best teams in the ACC, but I think that's a game that could potentially put college football world on notice. It's hey, Florida State can be a legit title contender this upcoming year. Not saying that Clemson is that good, but I'm just saying if they can do it again this year with as much as they lost, I think that would be a game, especially being October 5th. That's early in the season. I think that could be a game that puts college football world on notice. The one I think is the most interesting one on this list is Miami traveling to Louisville. And Alex, I'm 100% with you. I understand Louisville lost a lot. But like Bill said, when you have to travel to Louisville, that's a place that's just randomly a hard place to play for whatever reason. I feel like every year they get a win that they're not supposed to have.
Agreed.
Last year they had a couple of those, and that's why they were in the ACC championship game. And I get it. We talked a lot about what Louisville had last year and how high we were on them. But again, I don't think that meant that we thought they were going to be an ACC championship team. Like I don't think that's what that meant there. So I mean, I think Louisville will be a team that'll be surprising. I like that matchup as kind of being one of those low-key matchups of the week, but I wouldn't be surprised if, again, that's a game where Mario just wets the bed and is like, hey, we got this. This is a cakewalk. Half-asses the game plan in that week and ultimately loses to a Louisville team that shouldn't be that good.
All right. I honestly like the matchups you picked. Obviously Notre Dame pretty much playing an ACC schedule, so I'm cool with you throwing the Notre Dame Florida State game in there. The game I'm most excited for has got to be the games 1 and games 2 on your list. The Miami Florida State game is going to be a banger. The last time DJU and Cam Ward faced off against each other in the game, it was Washington State 38, Oregon State 35. And Damian Martinez, DJU, and Cam Ward were all involved in that game. Cam Ward throwing for over 400 yards in that game. Again, different teams, different defenses, different everything. But it was an exciting game to watch the first time. And that game could ultimately determine who. That's one of the most important games on both those teams' schedules. That the winner of that game could decide one side of the ACC championship. And the fact that's happening on October 26th, right in the middle of the schedule, that's a great time to have it. Florida State and Clemson, obviously earlier on in the season, that's going to be great. DJU kind of playing his old team. The thing with DJU is he's been in the ACC before. Some of the coaches that were there have seen him. We know what kind of numbers he put up in the ACC. 22 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. 2021 he had a 10 interception season. So I'm hoping he can kind of the couple of years since being in the ACC has kind of matured him in his playmaking abilities. But if he makes better decisions this year, Florida State's going to be fun to watch, and that's the reason why 3 of these games have them in it. I think the best game to watch for me is going to be game number 2, though. Florida State, Miami, a lot of Pac-12 talent, which no longer exists. The Cam Ward, DJU, like I said, Mario Cristobal, Norvell, the coaches going head-to-head, in-state rivalry. October 26th is definitely going to be my matchup to watch for in the ACC this year.
All right, well.
I think it's one thing we can agree. I think we all think, from everything I've heard, we think the ACC is going to be a little bit wide open and exciting. So, again, that's great.
Which conference will be more fun to watch, Big 12 or ACC? Like, which one will be the craziest?
I think Big 12. I think Big 12 is going to have damn near everybody with 3 losses, so I think it'll be Big 12 for me. ACC is interesting, but, again, we don't have a lot of the big-time matchups here, so I'll go with the Big 12 personally.
Okay, I think the ACC team that comes out is going to be better than the Big 12 team that comes up. I think you're right as far as during in-season, Big 12 is going to be a fun one.
See, it's funny you said that, Alex, because that's exactly what I was thinking. I think the football is going to be better in the ACC, but I think the Big 12 will be crazier. That was literally what was going through my head when you started to talk, so I agree.
All right, well, that's
all right. Well, real quick here, we got some little bit of Heisman, and then who we added to Eliminator, and then we'll wrap up this week's show. We're getting close to that 2-hour mark here, so let's go ahead and get it all wrapped up.
I will go first here because this is quick. This is easy for me. Listen, we've talked about Cam Ward at length on this show already. I'm going to go with Cam Ward for Miami. I think if Miami is in that conversation at the end of the year, especially the conference championship time of year, I think if Miami's there, that means Cam Ward's having a hell of a year. I think it puts him firmly in the Heisman discussion. So it's a really easy one. Like Cottrell said, we talked about him a lot last year. He started out on fire, then Washington State took a big dip and then kind of rebounded at the end of the year, but it was too late at that point. But I think if Miami has that much success and they're involved and they're in the discussions at the end of the year, that means he's having a really good year. I think the nomination and stuff, kind of at that point writes itself. So I'm going to go with Cam Ward for Miami.
For me here, I'll just go next here. Got my guy in the middle of the screen there. I'm going with Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina. Last year, he had 1,500-plus yards on the ground and 15 touchdowns, and he averaged 6 yards per carry. That is absolutely insane on a team that also had one of the top quarterbacks in the country in Drake May, who obviously went, number 3 to the Patriots. I think if, Omarion can have that kind of production last year, even alongside a guy who a lot of people early in the year picked to potentially win the Heisman. I think with that guy gone out of town, North Carolina is going to be relying on Omarion a lot more. And I truly think if he can get the numbers wise up, the number of carries up, if Omarion Hampton is at somewhere close 300 carries at the end of this season, that means he's going to be, again, just basing it off of where his averages are, he's probably going to be somewhere in the ballpark of 1,700 to 1,800 yards this year. And he's also going to have probably the same amount of touchdowns, like 15 or more touchdowns. The other thing is that a lot of what we talked about within the ACC was the scheduling. North Carolina has a very light schedule as well. Probably by the end of the year, I think the only team that they face on their entire schedule that will be ranked is going to be Florida State. So I think Omarion's going to have the opportunity to run it up on a lot of bad defenses and ultimately, put his name in that Heisman hat. Although I don't think North Carolina has that team success. So, ultimately may depend on if it gets recognized or not. But I think his numbers are going to be undeniable this year.
Yeah, I like North Carolina. We didn't really get a chance to talk about him today, but adding Max Johnson from A&M, I think that's a good replacement for Drake May. So I thought it'll be a fun team to watch this year. But I'm gonna jump over and I'm gonna do my man Preston Stone. Today is an SMU representing episode for me, and Preston Stone has got to be the man to do it. Because if SMU does make it to the ACC championship, you better bet it's because of him. And if he throws up numbers like he did last year. Just under, what is it? He had 3,200 yards last season, 28 touchdowns, very low touchdown to interception ratio, only 6 interceptions last year, only threw 1 interception in the last 7 games of the season before his injury, showing his progression and his maturity in the pocket. He's coming into his junior year this season, so he's got 2 years of eligibility left, and the sky's the limit for this kid, and the ACC better look out because this kid's going to light him up come this fall. And I'm excited for him to see what SMU can do. And if SMU's in the conversation at all, come 2 or 3 weeks from the end of the season, he's definitely going to be on people's Heisman lists.
All right. Well.
All right. So now we will click over to Eliminator. And we will add our ACC teams on here. And as you can see, Clemson, Miami, Notre Dame, de facto ACC team, and obviously Florida State. It's going to be very interesting to see when we get done building this 2 weeks from now compared to what it ends up being and see how many we get right and how many we got wrong. That's the fun of the college football season, obviously. The more chaos you get, the more wrong we'll be, but that also means we're having a better season. And then we were talking right before the show. We're gonna have to figure something out. I think we're gonna have to add a column, and we'll do something. We'll get our heads together because a loss isn't as killing as it was so much the last couple of years. So I think we're gonna spice up the Eliminator a little bit. So we'll have that ready to go before we actually start playing football.
Maybe change up the qualifications or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll figure it out.
We are. We're going to tweak it a little bit, because that's what we do. But
these 4 teams deserve to be there, though. I mean, they're going to be teams that have shots to either win the ACC and the Florida State, Clemson, Miami, or Notre Dame, who has the luxury of having the brand behind them, having a light schedule, and potentially putting themselves in that college football playoff. So we agreed on these 4. It wasn't really too hard to come to this either. So that's where we're at.
No, I can't disagree with anybody on this list. Except throwing Notre Dame in there. I'm not super high on them, but obviously, the hype is there, so they definitely deserve to be there until they show that they don't. So I'm happy with the 4 teams we added today. I'm not thrilled about my, excitement around Miami because it goes against everything I stand for, but it is what it is.
Still can't believe you, Alex.
Hey man, you called me out, and I was like, the whole time I was like, I'm not holding anything back anymore. It's just coming out. No more twists, no more turns. I'm just giving it to you straight.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
Fine, we'll see. All right, that is this week's show, preseason show number 2. Next week we'll be back. We were doing the SEC next week, so we're getting into the big boys. The SEC next week, Big Ten the following week, and then it's college football time, boys. We will have week 0, and then we will be hitting the hitting the ground running this year, which will be nice. Last year we kind of just started, week 0 was our first show. Having all this stuff out of the way this year, I think is going to make the show better because we're just going to dive right into football games and stuff, with week 0 this year. So next week we'll be back. SEC, more Eliminator. What list are we doing next week? Best helmets. What are we doing? That's gonna be a brawl, but that'll be fine.
I think we should do top 5 like favorite uniforms in college football, and it doesn't have to be like a specific team. Like obviously, I know Alex would say Oregon is like number 1, but like an actual like one specific jersey, like your top 5 like favorites in college football.
All right, we can do that. That'll be a brawl too, but that'll be fine. We'll do that. So top 5, like specific, like one specific combo.
Yeah, like if you want Michigan, you're like, they go all blue. When they all go all blue, I love it. Or if I was at Ohio State, like, oh, they go all scarlet. Alex would be like, their eggshell uniforms are my favorite. So
you guys, or like Notre Dame's green unis. I love those.
I hate the green unis.
We're gonna have fun next week.
I'm not with you on that.
No.
Not with you on that, Bill. The green.
You like the green ones?
The green ones are fire.
So fire.
You guys didn't wear anything special last year, did you? Control.
I don't think so. I think we went all scarlet one week, and that was it.
That was it. All right. So, we'll have to put that together. That's going to take some time, actually. But
I already got my list ready. Oregon option 1, Oregon option 2, Oregon option 3. No, I'm just kidding. I will have Oregon plus 4. So tune in and find out what the other 4 are.
No, you'll probably have 2 Oregon. I know.
Honestly, my favorite jersey combo, Bill kind of had a sneak peek at this about a month ago. My favorite uniform combo isn't actually Oregon. So that's a little
interesting.
Yeah, I sent Bill a picture a couple months ago when we were talking about something else, and that's my favorite. So you're going to be in for a whole surprise.
Yeah, I'm not going to ruin that because I actually know what it is. That's surprising. Be curious to see Cottrell's reaction to that. So that's it, gentlemen. Always fun, as always. Just ramping up, just getting started. It's getting so close that I'm getting to the point where I can't wait now because I just want football back. So
bad.
We will be back next week, next Saturday morning. Come and join us for episode 3. Like I said, SEC Preview. Apparently, we're going to argue about uniforms, more Eliminator, and we'll see what else we can sneak in. So that is it for this week. Signing off. We will see everybody next weekend.
See you.
Laters.